This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not reflect the opinions of the parent network or any of its other entities. They might not even reflect the opinions of the podcast host. The truth is out there. Here, we're just talking about things. Do your own research.
The jack of hearts will break me. Let's me watch you this baby. Does he ever go through your mind?
What's going on, everybody? I'm Jukebox, and we are back with another episode of Singed Eye Sockets right here on JG's Lounge with both my admins just hanging out with us at midnight, on damn near 1 o'clock for Sean. But, we do what we got to do to make things happen. And, this show is a lot of fun, and I love sort of the outcome we end up with by the end of it. For those of you who do watch us and watch the shows, you'll notice that we did do 2 different intros, but that's because we're doing a collab episode. We've done a lot. We've done kidnappings, we've done murders, we've done disappearances, and I was trying to think of more that we could do with it. And I thought alien abductions. There's cases out there that are pretty well researched and looked into. And so we're going with the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. Are either of you familiar with that?
I am not.
No, Sean? No, they're going in blind. This is great because if I fuck up, they're not going to know.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna say no initially, but I've done enough research over the years that I may be aware of it. Has there been, let me ask you one question. Has there been a movie that has been made about this abduction?
There's a TV series called Alien Abductions or Alien Encounters, and they do different abductions, and one of them is over Betty and Barney Hill. There is also something called Fire in the Sky that you can find on YouTube that kind of reflects on a couple different ones. Sean, you're smiling like you know what that one is.
I have the Blurred Lines podcast, man. Come on. I mean, I'm like 2 steps away from that dude on History Channel. Alien,
I think the one thing about this particular, before we get into this, there's a lot of things going on with the channel. We just released another episode of Consistently Inconsistent. Sean and I have just launched our show, Message Pending, which is more along the lines of we present a situation and discuss whether it is a right or wrong, and how maybe it could have been done differently. We did this first episode of Singed with me and Sean before we all kind of established more of like this cold case file concept, and which was great. But the first episode we did, just me and Sean, didn't really kind of fit what we're doing now. So we decided to start this other show, Message Pending. And I think it's going to be a little bit more of a serious kind of eye-opener of different options and ways things could have been done differently. And it might even get kind of teary because there's some of the stuff it's messed up because you can kind of see the point of each person in the clips that we do. So, and Sean, I think you remember with the dropped wallet, there was a few times where, it kind of hit you emotionally. So, we're getting into more and more shows and more topics, and it's just fun what we do. And whether it's comedy or serious, I want everybody to know that we just want you guys to appreciate what we do and enjoy it and have options. You might not like my Stardom podcast where we say shit and fuck every other word half the time, unless Evolution's on the phone, then we're usually pretty held back. If he's on the show, I mean. But there's times where we get really explicit. But that's the whole beauty of this network. Sean, you've got plenty of shows on here now. You got the Shawshank Redemption podcast, which
Yep.
We had a little hiccup there, but we got your show out. But
Right.
we're gonna keep it going, and Evolution's got the Journey 2 in the works. So if you guys haven't seen Journey 1, check it out. You know what? And actually, Sean, you want to give a shout out to a couple of your sponsors, because I know there's a couple of people that you work with.
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, I'm happy to be here again with you guys. Always a treat. But I do want to give a shout out to a couple of sponsors. One being Black Label Chronometers. As we know, Ryan Babb creates amazing timepieces from scratch, and he custom makes everything, and I would almost say painstakingly so, but he makes oh man, holy cow. See, we're going to be talking about alien stuff, and stuff's happening already with the technology every time. I'm telling you guys, every time. This happened in the last. We did a Blurred Lines podcast. What happens? Stuff starts shutting down in the middle of this thing. You're talking about. Yep. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so Black Label Chronometers. Also want to give a shout out to Redemption Cannabis. They give 10% of every sale back to fighting possession imprisonments, things like that. So, I rep their brand for them, and I'm very happy to do so. And Green Stem Dispensaries, also myvibe.com. They have a nice smelling salt thing. So big fan of that. And last but not least, Meat So Horny, MSH.com, MSH Nation. Check them out. And I think that's about everybody.
All right. Evolution, what you got, man? What do you got you working on right now?
Right now, I got, I just did a couple more movie reviews. I've been banging those out pretty good. You should get them in the library that I always send everything to, if you haven't noticed already.
There's a few that I already see on there, ready to go.
And then, keeping rolling with what's going on. There was a little break in there, so Poetics could get his vacation time on. And then we got That's Life episodes. We're working, always, to get the right guests with the right season or stories that we have set up. And about that, I got a couple of those lined up to get rolling here soon. So you'll be seeing about 10 things popping off here in the next couple of days or so.
That's great, man. I mean, we just launched the episode number 20 or show number 20 with our message pending episode show, and then I just came up with another one that I've actually been communicating with the two of you on, more so with Sean than you, Stan, just because I know you've been working. So I was doing research for this show actually, and a case file came up for a criminal who was a diagnosed schizophrenic, and for some reason I started reading into it, and it kind of talked about his upbringing and some of the messed up things that he went through, and there's a lot of trigger warnings for me, and then it gets into sort of the crimes that he committed, and then he ended up being convicted for life and ended up being sentenced to death. But the thing that got me the most was sort of the way that he was raised. And so I came up with a new show concept called Confined Entropy. And we're going to discuss criminal cases where the criminals have some sort of a diagnosis, like a medical diagnosis, whether it's schizophrenic or, other things. And then break down maybe some of the situations as they were raised that could have developed them into who they are today, which is a lot of the times. And while researching a lot of these other podcasts out there that do convict things and stuff like that, they don't really tap into the mind of the criminal. And I think that that's something that we could do really well on here. I haven't decided if it's going to be the three of us or if I'm going to have different guests on each time. But it'll be sort of a similar flow to the Singed Eye Sockets, other than we'll be talking more along the mindset of the people, and whether we think that the justice system was fair about it, or maybe if there could have been a different direction they could have went to help these people, or if they even were somebody who needed help. So that's
Nice.
a show we're working on. So.
Well, I mean, you know what I'm getting my doctorate in. So just if you have me on, just have me on like Skoda in Law and Order. I'll just play the psychologist part and be like, well, he could have done it for that reason, but you know.
Yeah, and there's a lot. I mean, I came from a rough past, and I know I could have went down a totally different path. So, you know, but that's besides the point, everybody. We're just kind of keeping you updated on the network. Things on Facebook are going fantastic, which is great. Now that I know how to change it to public, way to go, me. We have been hitting, minimum, a couple hundred views for most of the shows. Some of them 150, 130, 140. It don't matter. And they're still climbing. So, thank you everybody that watches, everybody that tunes in. We do have commentary, so you guys can jump in the comments, and we will include them on here. Unless you're just being a complete jackass, then we'll ignore you. So for today, we have a alien abduction case, which is actually the very first publicly recognized alien abduction case, and this is of Betty and Barney Hill. So this right here is Betty and Barney Hill. They are an interracial couple back in 1961, which during this time, the civil rights movement's going on. As a matter of fact, Barney is like the lead counsel in Boston. He's one of the seats on the council for NAACP. And she is also involved in helping him with all of this stuff. And so he's a councilman. He helps with discrimination cases and helping. He's a very well-known person in his group in his community for helping with civil rights movements and very active. They're also both Unitarian, which means that the church that they go to, I don't know if are you familiar with the Unitarian religion?
No, enlighten me.
So Unitarian is basically a church where they welcome all religious beliefs.
Okay.
So a little bit of Christianity, a little bit of Judaism, a little bit, just a congregation of people who kind of have this equality mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it says a lot about them because they're both very helpful in the community, very involved. And to me, this kind of hits because being the fact that he's in the civil rights, so he even there's records of him actually walking with Martin Luther King, and there's a lot going on for them for something like this to happen. Like it's like an unwanted situation that occurs. So I think in a sense it might give a little bit of validity to it. Sean, what do you got going on?
It's just horrible thoughts. Look, dude, would you say it's 1961?
1961.
Okay, so you have an accomplished black guy who's making waves in the country, right? Walking with the doctor, and he sits on a board. It sounds like he's got some sort of legal degree, possibly. I'm not sure there. Maybe he's Juris Doctorate. And married to a white lady, which it was, if it were a white man married to a black woman back then, that was still a faux pas, but it is exponentially much more so with a black man married to a white woman, because how standards work, right?
Right.
So you're sitting here talking about, mysterious abductions and everything. And I'm like, just sitting here going, sure. And let me guess, the aliens were dressed in white robes and had pointy hoods, right?
And this is a good point, because this was a lot of the criticism on their abduction is that maybe something did happen and they didn't want the public to know exactly what it was. Maybe they were trying to cover it up with this encounter. Mm-hmm. But there's things that happened during the encounter that question that a lot.
Really.
and we're going to get into that.
Oh, I'm sure. You boy
I
got-
want to add that Sean makes very good points, no doubt. But the picture that they took, the thing that really jumped out to me on that picture was the dog. They're holding a dog. Usually, when
Yes.
most people take a portrait like that, there's no animal. But I just
Well,
think that
Delcy is a part of this. Delcy is actually the dog. His name is Delcy.
okay,
Delcy is in the car during this abduction, so Delcy is a part of this, and that's why I actually picked this picture.
okay, all right.
So Betty is a social worker, and
Mhm.
Barney works for the Postal Service on top of doing all these other things that he does.
Mhm.
Betty's family loves Barney because they're all very political and they love, kind of having that conversation with him. And so they all get along. But they didn't really get the opportunity to do a honeymoon. So they decided they're going to do a little trip to Niagara Falls. They live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And Barney and Betty are legit. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, they're great people. Actually, everything you look on them, there's nothing to be said about either one of them that's negative.
Mhm.
So and I do actually encourage a lot of people to look in this case because it is very, I wouldn't say controversial, but there's a lot to be said. Scariest story I ever heard. Okay, that's there is relative. I mean, like I said, some of this audio clips that I'm going to share with you guys, you're going to be like, "What the fuck?" So
Yeah.
thank you, Worm, for sharing that. So yeah, they're both very involved in the community. They have their full-time day jobs. They're involved in a lot of things. So they decide, hey, we didn't really get our honeymoon. Let's make a trip to Niagara Falls.
Mhm.
So they make a trip to Niagara Falls. And around this time, they're testing this new hurricane Doppler system. It's a brand new, and there is a warning of a hurricane that is approaching. So instead of them on their last night staying in Niagara Falls, they decide, hey, let's drive back and try to beat this thing. So they're going down Route 3 from Niagara Falls back to Portsmouth and around Lancaster, New Hampshire, which I'm not familiar with these places, but some of you might know. Hearing Barney scream and his regression is true horror. True. You're gonna hear it. You're gonna hear it again on this episode. So stay tuned, everybody. I did take bits. There's a lot of the audio recordings from the hypnosis that are under not copyright, but they're not for public access. For some reason, the University of New Hampshire actually has all of the case files on Barney and Betty Hill. So they're on their way back, and they have binoculars in the car, and Betty is looking out the window, and she observes something cross the moon, and she immediately thinks it's a falling star. She points it out to Barney. Doesn't think anything of it. Barney is very skeptic on the whole aliens and all of that, so he's just kind of puts it out, and then she sees it again hovering in the sky, and she notices that it's kind of getting a little bit closer to them, and it's behaving erratically. So she wants Barney to look with the binoculars, and he says, "Okay, well, Delcy, their dachshund, wants to go, probably needs to go to the bathroom." So he pulls over to the side of the road. And he's looking through these binoculars and he sees this object that he initially thought was a commercial plane, but he said that the behavior of the plane and the way that it was flying and then it would stop, and he said it was like this flat disc, and the lights that were on the side of it didn't really match up with that of a commercial plane. So they get back in the car and start to drive away. And they realize that this thing is now very close. It's very close to them. And they start to feel vibrations. And they said there was like a blinking noise or a beeping noise. And they remember seeing they saw right next to them, like on the mountainside, just off in the distance. And at this point, Barney is really freaked out because he knows it's not a plane, but they continue to drive. And as the vibrations start to intensify, Betty looks up and notices that she can't see any stars. And Barney looks out and realizes that this thing is above them. Barney was stoic, logical, and not prone to fancy. It's true. I mean, he was he has a military background too. He was in the military for a few years. Very, very intelligent too. I believe his IQ was 140. I don't know how great that is, but probably better than me. So at this point, they say that this thing stops in front of them in the road, and it's hovering about 300 feet above the ground, and it's very visible. And the next thing they remember is about 35 minutes later, they're driving home. They don't remember anything else at this point. Okay. They're driving home. They get home, and it's Betty realizes that her watch on her wrist is not working, so she changes it to the clock on her microwave, which was 5:16 is what it read, but it never worked again. So they did find out later that they ended up home about 2 hours later than they were supposed to. So there's a loss of time in there. Betty was very adamant about them leaving all of their belongings and stuff by the back door for whatever reason. Barney talks about how it was kind of weird, how she was kind of being that way. And she's very wants to tell somebody about this. And Barney's like, let's be smart and kind of don't get too crazy about it. And she calls her sister. She's telling, hey, we witnessed a UFO. And they end up taking these long showers, get off whatever, because they know something happened. They do know that something happened. And they take a little nap. And Betty's dress that she was wearing was torn at the hems. Her zipper was broken. And there was staining marks on the inside of the dress. But instead of washing it, she ends up just hanging it and putting it in her closet.
What?
Yes. Do you guys, before I get a little bit more into this, do you guys have anything that you want to talk about? I mean, I did do a lot of research, so there might be some stuff I didn't say that I can fill you in on.
Well, it sounds like the 2-hour delay that they can't remember was more beneficial to Betty than it was Barney. I know it's kind of messed up, but her dress was ripped and zipper broke and had stains on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Barney mentions that the strap on his binoculars was broken, and he doesn't remember it breaking. He does remember he does have very scuffed up shoes, which he also doesn't remember what happened in order for his shoes to be all scuffed up. So about 10 days later, those stains are still unmatched and not biologically understood. This is true. There were 3 components that have been tested from 5 different laboratories that are very rare items to find on Earth. They're typically found on other planets.
Seriously?
Yeah, there's 3 items that were found on it. One of them being, let me see here. I actually think I did the recording on it. One of them was terranium, which is very rare. And a lot of alien abduction cases or any sort of UFO sightings, terranium shows up on it a lot. And that is an item that you cannot find here on Earth. And that did show up on her dress.
I've got some questions, man.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Because I mean, this sounds fairly boilerplate, from other abduction stories that I've ever looked into over the years. But first question, how was the dog acting? Was there anything in the reports on how
the dog was? So the dog was scared because, and this will, I was wanting to wait to kind of discuss this when we start talking about the hypnosis side of it, because they mentioned they don't remember getting back in the vehicle. All they remember is this thing comes up in front of them, and then they hear these vibrating noises, and then they end up waking up. They're 35 minutes from where they were, which they found out later on after backtracking. 35 minutes down the road from what they remember. and they don't remember anything within that 2-hour time span. But during the hypnosis, it does come up about them getting back to the vehicle, and was it Delcy? I think the dog name was like quivering in the back seat of the car when they got back in the car.
Okay. And her watch.
Yeah. Barney had a watch too. He said, according to the niece, so niece, I didn't really bring him too much into this, but she's still alive today and is now officially a ufologist, specializes in this stuff. She said that Barney said it wasn't working. He just tossed it. And Betty did not. She didn't toss it. She just changed it to the time of the clock when they got home, and it never changed. So, and it was 5:16. They should have been there about 2 hours earlier. So something happened.
Okay, but the watch never worked again.
No.
Is what you said.
No.
Did they ever have that thing looked at? Was the metal inside fused?
No. So the Kathy, the niece, actually, I was just listening to an interview earlier today with her on it, said that there's too many times that people turn things in for testing and then they end up damaging it or never getting it back. And she said she wants to keep that for herself. So she never actually got it looked at.
Okay. And then the address is what they found, the terrarium and the different things on it, right?
Worm, we appreciate you finding us, man. This is a hell of a channel. All of us appreciate you checking us out. Thank you so much. We have tons and tons of shows on this channel, and we do them live so that we can meet people like you. So thank you so much for being a part of this, and feel free to continue commenting, and we'll communicate with you throughout. Since the niece had several abductions in her life story, so that could be something we can discuss later on. But so yeah, never got tested. Anything else? You got any more questions before we keep going?
No, I know how you do these things, and I'm trying to put the little different parts together because sometimes the most minuscule details make a difference. Like the dress seems very sensational, and I'm not saying that it's not, but some of the things that stick out aren't, the missing time I get, but like I said, that's boilerplate. But it's the locating everything by the back door. That's
and that's what, and Barney points out how that's very weird of her, because he said that Betty was never that way. She was always like immediately wash the stuff and put it away. Like he said, it's very something that she did after coming back that was very not normal of her to do.
Right.
And so they both agreed that something happened. They both agreed that something would happen.
Right. So, but I'm wondering about the psychology of that. But then the other thing too, it's like Worm said, this dude was a stoic, and I practice stoicism. So I understand, like Seneca and the different stoics, like the practice of stoicism. If this guy was truly a stoic, and just to get the statues, as an example, right?
Right.
I don't know. So I'm just going to put that out there right now. These things are kind of sticking out, and I want to hear more.
Okay.
So Warren mentioned the dress was tested multiple times.
Right.
They still came back with the same type of stuff, though.
Yes, there's 3 things. I don't remember what. I just remember that terrarium is one that is very rare to find. It is found in the universe, but on Earth it is very rare to come by. But a lot of alien abduction cases tend to have some form of terrarium on anything that was like any certain objects. They did note the day after that there were markings on the trunk of Barney's vehicle. They were like cylindrical markings that were burned into the back of the vehicle. And whenever they would put a compass close to it, it would whirl and spin like crazy. And that weren't there the day before. I don't have any pictures of that or anything, but that was something that they talk about.
Okay.
So about 10 days later, Betty starts having nightmares about the incident, and she starts writing it down in a journal. And then there, at one point, I believe it's October of the same year of 61, they're in church, and they are talking and doing a speech. And one of the chief detective was a guest there at the church at the time, and he talked to the Hills afterwards about potential hypnotherapy because they realized that there was missing time.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned that they shouldn't go to an amateur. They should find somebody that specializes in hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So they find Dr. Benjamin Simon. So Dr. Benjamin Simon was noted to be he was a chief of neuropsychiatry in the military, an executive officer at Mason General Hospital. He specialized in treating military and soldiers with PTSD through hypnosis and was very well renowned. So they reach out to him and he decides, yeah, I'll do the hypnosis. And he does what's called a regression hypnosis. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Let's see what we got here. Barney busted. He was not one to break. He fell in love with a white woman. At the time could get you killed. Why would he have to make up a new boogeyman when he already had racist? And that's a huge thing for me, especially because before we get into this hypnosis, if you think about the things that happened to them, they're in the middle of nowhere. What if there's some people who saw him driving by and were like, look at that interracial couple, followed him and did some things to him. And in order to kind of cover it up for, reputation reasons or whatever, a lot of the skeptics kind of came up with this theory that something did happen into those woods to them, but it might have been more realistic, like some hillbilly bad guys stopped them in tracks and did some things to them, and they came up with this wild theory of an abduction. I get it. If you base on the time and the fact that people kind of scoured over that, it's shitty that that's the way it is, especially being who Betty and Barney are. But I see how that would be an easy just one-off, like, nope, it wasn't any abduction. Something happened to him in the woods. They got beat, whatever, and they just didn't want to talk about it. I don't think that
this is what throws me while I'm thinking about it. I don't mean to cut you off, but if that were the case, there wouldn't be any stopwatches. There wouldn't be any marks on the car. There wouldn't be any kind of radiation type of stuff going on when they put the things around them. So to me, that kind of throws that out the window.
Right. And there's more to it that gives me the same response that you just said.
How long was it from the time of the alleged abduction to the time they went to the hypnotherapist for the regression?
This is about a year later.
A year later.
It was December of 1962 that they.
Okay, so they've been living with this for a year,
right?
And it's getting exponentially worse as they go along.
Yes, and it's not really public. I mean, they talked to some of the military in town, and actually somebody had mentioned to them that I believe they talked to a detective who said that the army base near them had been telling the police stations that if they got any reports of UFOs, that it needed to be addressed with them. So they did get involved with the military pretty soon on. And they were interested in this case. Like, they wanted to know, why are they asking for information about UFOs around this time? So obviously there's something going on. You had Roswell in 47. This is 61. There were skeptics, but this is the first abduction. This is the first person who came forward. They're like, hey, we've been abducted.
Right. Okay. Here's the thing, guys. Before we keep going, let's not act like the Pentagon just not that long ago say, oh yeah, by the way, there's UFOs, and collectively the nation went, fuck yeah, we know. All right. Like, it's been admitted, it's out there. So this whole, thing of it's, aliens, it's craziness. No, we know for a fact that they exist. Right. So let's scrub that out of the negative aspect out of our minds with that, for one. But for two, I find it highly suspect, because something you said in the very beginning was, that the storm was a coming, there was a hurricane and they were testing out a new Doppler system,
Mhm.
right? And then all of a sudden this UFO thing shows up.
Mhm.
Now, there's been so much speculation on domestic versus interstellar, is it one of ours where we've reverse engineered the technology, right? Or is it something extraterrestrial?
Right.
Okay. Because if the government's sitting there and you never trust the government, they are
Mhm.
never there to help. They lie, they cajole, they do everything, they keep everything from us because it is in their best interest to do so. So now
Right.
you have them stepping in and saying, if anything happens, you let us know first.
Right.
If I'm local law enforcement, I'm going, well, that's skeptical as fuck.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like that recent thing down in Mexico, like I was telling you guys about before we went on air, with that massive, perfectly cylindrical, geometric radar blob that was
Mhm.
over Mexico City, right? Just to
Mhm.
hang in there, and everybody's like, "What the fuck is this?" And the thing universally that was coming out from people is like, "Wow, that looks a lot like a mothership," because it was 300 kilometers in size.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
It's so if we just can agree that this stuff exists, it happens,
Mhm.
everything that we're talking about doesn't seem so far-fetched. But now I think it's almost a thing now. Is it our own military that's doing this, or is it extraterrestrial and the military knew some of this shit was going on and they were trying to keep up with the reports to keep an eye on it?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, and I do want to say that Dr. Simon taking on this case, he did it because he's good at what he does,
Mhm.
and he thinks that he can actually help them. He's very
Mhm.
skeptic about it. It says, "Have any of you ever had an experience?" I have. I think that could
Yeah.
be. I do think that this could be another episode. Worm, seriously, subscribe to the channel. We do stuff all the time. I'd be happy to do some stuff on this because I know that Sean and I probably have some. I know I have one for sure, but
Mhm.
I want to focus on this for today. But thank you for asking that. So he's skeptic about aliens. He doesn't necessarily believe in aliens. This is the doctor doing
Mhm.
the therapy sessions, and what he decides to do is what's called regressive therapy, where not only does he interview them separately, he does what's something called reverse amnesia, to where after they do the session, he erases their minds on what they had just discussed with him. And the reason he
Mhm.
does it is so that they can't go and collaborate through the whole duration of these therapy sessions where he's hypnotizing them and getting information out.
That's weird. Okay.
It's weird, but it does make sense. It really does. And he's very well known, very well respected in the government agencies and in the military for helping all these people with PTSD. So on the first session, he starts out with Barney, and Barney goes into basically the exact same information that was initially said. We were driving down the road. Betty saw this. We pulled to the side. I saw it. I started getting creeped out because something wasn't right. And that's where this first part comes in. This first little clip of the recording comes in, and I'm going
Mhm.
to play it, is him talking about what this thing looked like.
I can see it tilted toward me. Tilted? What does it look like now when you say tilted? Did you see wings? It looks like a big pancake with windows and rows of windows and lights of not light, just one huge light. And rows of windows like a commercial plane? Rows of windows. They're not like a commercial plane because they curve around to the size of this pancake. And I say, my God, no. I have to shake my head. I got you. It can't be true. This isn't fair.
So that's what so again, he initially thought this was a commercial plane, but by the time it got so close to where he's like, okay, this is not supposed to be. And he even talks about it, seeing 6 to 12 figures spread across the window frame, and one of them even kind of looking at him and smiling, like he knew that he was looking at him. At this point, he gets in the car, they're driving off, and then they say that it comes down, and they get around the corner, and there they are right in the middle of the road, basically hovering directly over them, and they stop. And then he says this is where things start to get, a little bit more like, man, this is really, really messed up. He says, yes, Worm, I do believe it's based on how he's reacting to the situation and explaining it. I don't see how you could, try to say that's just a plane. They mentioned several times how there was no sound emanating from this thing at all. But this next audio clip is going to be when they initially got stopped, where they went around the corner before they lost consciousness.
Stay there and keep looking. Just keep looking and stay there. And just keep looking. Just keep looking. Could you hear each other? Oh, I got to pull these binoculars away from my eyes. Because if I don't, I'll just keep staying there. Could you hear him tell you this? Oh, no, he didn't say it. You felt he said it. I know. You know he said it. Just there, yeah. Just stay there, he's saying to me. All right. I'll take in my head. Just pull the binoculars away. God, give me strength. All right. Pull them down. Run! Pull these binoculars down and run. God! It says, my God, give me strength. I gotta get away. Oh, Betty! All right. You gotta get away, Betty. All right.
So at this point in the hypnosis, he starts talking about how he's gets back to the car, and his only worry is we need to get out of here because he knows these things aren't human, and he says they want us, like they want something to do with us. And yes, telepathic attack is what the hypnotherapist actually described it as, because he did mention that they weren't talking to him directly, but he knows that they were saying it. So he gets back in the car and he does drive, and this is in the hypnotherapy. He doesn't mention it any time before this. And he said he gets the sudden urge to turn down this road and go into the woods. And then there's this orange bright light in front of them, and several of these characters that are just in the road, basically doing like a roadblock. So they stop, and Betty in her hypnosis is they're very similar at this point. Both of theirs are very similar reactions. Betty talks about how these entities split up and go to either side of the vehicle, and she is terrified. They don't grab the dog, but they did tell her, according to Betty, there was one of these entities, the leader, as she called it, who would actually talk to her. She says it's in English. He's hard to understand, but because he's got a heavy accent, but he's actually talking to her and he's being nice to her. He said, "You're going to be fine. You're going to be safe. Just come with us." And Betty recalls when Barney gets pulled out of the vehicle, he's almost in like a hypno state to where he's like almost sleeping. And she discussed,
scuffed shoes,
the scuffed shoes, right? And she says that she's following these characters. They're not harming her. She looks over at Barney. She said he's about 5 feet away from her, and it's like they're carrying him, because she says they're all about 5'4", around in that. So they're not very tall. She says they're grayish in tone with very blue lips and these very dark eyes, but they were wearing suits. They had these caps and these suits, and two of these gentlemen or these things are carrying Barney to the vehicle. And Barney talks about how he's scared, like he remembers it, but he kept his eyes closed, which is why Betty thought that he was sleeping because he was too scared to do anything. They had a name too. Oh, okay. Let me know what that is, Liquidated. I'd like to know. And he even mentions that he remembers feeling his feet getting moved, but he's not the one moving. So he knew he was being carried onto this ship. Yes. And they each get taken. This is where Betty says that they go in two separate rooms. And she says it's almost like a wedge-shaped room. And they immediately take a hair sample. They take fingernail samples. And do a few other like vital type testing on him, looking in her eyes and her ears. They took an ear swab, and then the leader asked her to get undressed and to lay on the table, which she does. And she mentions that they were helping her take the dress off, which would explain where was the tearing on the dress. And this next part is a clip from her. This is the last audio clip that I took. I didn't want to get too much because I don't want to get in trouble. So here's what we get from Betty.
And the examiner has a long needle in his hand. And I see the needle. And it's bigger than any needle I've ever seen. And I asked him what he's going to do with it. And he said, just a simple test, it won't hurt me. And I asked him what. And he said he just wants to put it in my navel. And it's just a simple test. And I told him, no, it will hurt. Don't do it. Don't do it. And he said, no, it won't hurt. And he sticks a needle into my navel. And he says, I'll be all right. I won't feel it. And all the pain goes away.
So this is a procedure that in 1961 wasn't very well known. It's called a anesthesiosis, which in 1961 had maybe just been introduced into like the medical system. It's a way for them to test if there's any like disorders or disabilities with the fetus still in the womb.
I thought that was an amniocentesis.
That's what I said. Amniocentesis.
Okay.
But yes, no. In 1961, this is not known. Like there's no way for her to really have known what this procedure was. But she does say that the leader came over and waves his hand over her head and then apologizes about her being in pain, but she says it just goes away. The recollection under therapy is real. I think so. The thing that sucks is under hypnosis is it's hard to really, say for certain. But even this therapist, who's a skeptic, by the end of this, even says they truly believe this happened. And he believes that something serious happened. She does go on to say that after that, they're finished with her. They let her get dressed, and she's just hanging out in the room with this leader, the one who's been talking to her. And she's asking, like, "Hey, can I take something back, from the room, so I have some proof that this happened?" And the leader says, "Yeah, sure, of course." And she finds this book, and she says that it's got all these like markings of a language that she doesn't understand. Then the examiner comes back in. She says they're like mumbling, almost arguing, like they're not moving their mouths, but they're communicating through mumbling. And then he says, "Sorry, you can't take it." So then she asks, where are you guys from? And they pull out, she says that they pull out this star map out of the wall. And she ends up drawing it. Here's what it looks like. She drew it to the best of her ability. Let me see if I can't make this bigger, guys. And she says that when she's talking to him, he's describing the solid lines as areas that they traveled to, and that the dotted lines are trade routes to other star systems. Later in 1968, a teacher ends up, who's also an astronomer, finds what they believe this drawing is based off of, which is this, and this is the Zeta Reticuli star system, which looks pretty similar
Yeah.
to what she drew. Now, I don't know if she knew what that was at the time. What does this say? Why would you screw yourself when you're already under the gun? You know, this is why I really doubt that what they're saying is inaccurate, because why would they come up with all of this? Like they have things are going good for them, and there's
Nothing to be gained from it.
There's nothing to gain. There's nothing at all to gain from it. And Barney wanted so hard to keep this out of the public eye. He was trying very hard to keep it out of the public eye because he didn't want that image. But he did notice, I mean, he was worried about his wife, you know, with these dreams and then this recurring stuff. What do you guys got so far at this point?
Well,
You go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Sean. No, go ahead.
Well, okay. So we've talked about this in different episodes about, you know, if you take any one thing by itself, maybe convincing, maybe not. But, you know, if you take it all as an aggregation, then it becomes like almost irrefutable, right? The stuff on the trunk, right? And the thing going crazy, the animal reacting the way it does, you know, things being irradiated, you know, trying to put all this stuff by the door. I would almost hazard a guess that if somebody took a Geiger counter or compass near all of their belongings, it would probably go batshit crazy as well, right? The dress, all right, she couldn't take anything back, but she decided to hang it up instead of washing it. That is almost like a victim, if you're looking at like it from a psychology standpoint of preserving evidence. Right? And she's wanting to tell people, he's wanting it to go away. He tosses the watch. She's keeping everything. Yeah. It's like you're seeing two competing mindsets with this whole thing.
Right.
And then, you know, the star chart that she draws is very close, you know, to something that, you know, is already existing, you know, the advanced. And was she pregnant? Because if they're doing amniocentesis on her.
No, she was not pregnant.
She was not pregnant. Okay. Interesting. All right.
Look, okay, so Sean, I'm gonna say something real quick. I don't mean to cut you off.
No,
but I think because of his reaction and her reaction, I'm thinking about what they did for a living. So he's in the public eye, and he's doing a lot of things in society, and she's a social worker. You know what I mean? So I think because of what she does, she wants to communicate this experience to as many people as possible, and he wants to shut it down. He's like, no, I don't want everybody to think I'm crazy. You know, I don't want them to ruin my reputation. So
well, I don't think it's just a public eye thing, though. Evolution. I mean, if this guy's a stoic, he's military. You heard what from his own mouth. No. Like it's almost like cognitive dissonance. He is trying to make it, you know, like somebody covering their ears and something outside of the scope of reality, of everyday reality, right? And he's like basically like make it not real, right? So if he's going back and he's peeling stuff off, he doesn't want to talk about it. It's like his mind is almost going into protection mode, right? And so I think, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think you're probably right. I think it probably does have to do with his public life, but I think it also has to do with his ingrained psychology. You know, military man, stoic. You know, a man of responsibility and position. Right. Like all of these things that he's got going on, and she's a social worker. You know, she's all emotion and getting things worked out, talked out. So she's like, you know, we got to talk about this. You know, I mean, it's, yeah.
You got anything else, Evolution?
Well, I'm just listening to all the points here, and it just sounds like they had an episode that they can't explain, even though they was there and can't remember.
Right.
Something definitely happened. You know, when you get stains on a dress that have uh, something that's from outer space, right?
Right.
And you lose time, and you know your watch devices no longer work, and you know, scuff shoes, like somebody was carrying you and dragging you. I mean, this is straight direct contact. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So who knows what happened? You know what I
Right.
mean?
And during the hypnosis, a lot of this stuff comes up. And Worm, I mean, you're just putting out straight points, man, bullet points here. I mean, you're not right, or you're not right. You're not wrong. A lot of this leans towards it being such a realistic case because, even the government was involved. Like, hey, we want to know what you saw. And at one point, she discusses, and after all of this hypnosis and everything's done, Betty talks about how the government was taking a lot of this and blue booking it and changing the storyline. Like
of course,
they want to
of
know all
course.
the information, and most of what they wanted to know about was the UFO. How'd it look? What were the rooms like? What kind of tools were they using? Like those were whenever she had any sort of investigation with any government official, it was always based around the UFO itself. It was never about their situation and what occurred with them, but rather the scenery and the UFO.
Okay, so I want to focus on the storm and the Doppler machine, whatever. I'm thinking if this is actual, that was probably the transformation, time warp, whatever that they went through portal in order to make uh, this appearance possible.
Well, during this time, there's a lot of talk of like nuclear warfare, getting it towards the end of the Cold War,
Mhm.
and a lot of these alien abductions and these UFO sightings, even today, have to do with like being around nuclear plants, sort of like launching some new electrical whatever. Are you guys getting like some weird feedback?
Yes, massively.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
got that
They're
too.
listening.
I'm gonna blame it on Worm. That just means that we've accepted you into our group.
Okay, jukebox. Do you mind if I say something real quick?
Yeah, man, go ahead. I mean, there's a little bit more because now we're gonna get to the point of leaving it, and so yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so like if you dip into the whole, extraterrestrial cryptids, there's grays and reds and the reptilians. There's so many different types of assumed extraterrestrial races that have a vested interest in this planet.
Right.
And the thing that I find interesting, because if the government is incredibly interested in the tech and, well, what shape are the rooms? What did it look like? What do you see around there? It's almost like they're trying to identify who picked them up because they don't care about what was done to them. They want to know about the surroundings, the architecture, right? Is what it sounds like to me.
Interesting. That's very
So,
interesting.
right. So if we, go with if we posit that the different races are true and the governments are like, explain the architecture to us. You like if somebody down here were saying, well, what kind of buildings do you see? Well, they were four-sided and they all came to a point. They'd be like, well, those are pyramids. You were probably seeing a ziggurat, down south or South America or in Egypt, right? So maybe that's the same thing. Like they're trying to figure out what race was down here picking them up because they're doing a threat assessment.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. So Betty talks about, after she talks about the star map, she talks about how she's still talking with the leader, and the examiner comes back in and starts kind of messing with her teeth, and she realizes it's not. Hold on, what are you saying here, man? It's really not about what they look like, but what do they want? Correct. And it seems like they're just studying them, honestly. According to Betty, this was a very, other than the needle and the navel, she said it was very pleasant. She said when she started screaming and was in pain, the leader came and kind of waved his hand over her and the pain was gone. The leader was very sympathetic with her, and she even makes a point to say that some of these other characters almost seemed like robots. And if we talk about the Greys, we know all these theories about the Greys being more of like a suit for aliens to kind of communicate through. That's actually been talked about in many cases. So it's possible, it's possible that some of them were real and some of them were just, robots or whatever. But she talks about them coming to look at her teeth, and she says, oh, they must be looking at Barney because Barney has dentures, because back when he was in the military, he was in a grenade accident and lost a lot of his teeth. So they came, but then she jokes about it. Like under the hypnosis, she kind of giggles and she's like, you think an advanced race would understand what that was, the dentures. And so then she says that they said, okay, we're going to take you guys back. And she remembers Barney still being in this trance-like state as they head back to their vehicle. And they tell Barney talks about how they tell him to wait until the UFO departs before they leave. And he gets back in the vehicle. They both do. And they start driving. And they remember that Delsey's in the back, cowering. So she was left in the vehicle. They did have a gun in the car that Barney had grabbed earlier on when they were first looking at it, when he started getting scared. And he said it was still in the seat when they got back to the car. So they didn't take anything out of the vehicle. The vehicle was untouched, minus the markings on the back of the trunk, which they found. And so
or you get back and the tires and the hubcaps are missing. It was an intergalactic buggy.
There's center blocks underneath the car. Wheels are gone.
She's like, where's my purse?
We got some we got some hood aliens, guys. Just come take on it.
the first space jacking. Oh man.
And that's it. I mean, that the hypnosis kind of fills in that 2-hour gap. And then I've already kind of explained the rest, and it does go on where they start getting publicity. They really just wanted this case to be either proven that what happened, or it didn't. In 1964, one of the major, I think the Boston Post did an article on them, and it kind of threw them back into the picture, which they didn't want any of this. They didn't want the publicity. They didn't want to make money off of this. They just wanted to let people know what happened to them. And it's kind of backfiring in them, which might be a positive way for some people with the publicity, but they didn't want that, which kind of gives me more leaning towards the fact that this is they have nothing to gain from this. Really, they don't want it to be public. And when it does happen, it causes it more issues. Barney starts having problems. There is talk of Barney inspecting him, which I forgot to tell this. When they were inspecting him, they did a sperm sample they put a cup over his groin and took a sperm sample. And then he ended up with warts around, a ring of warts around his genitals. He gets them tested, and they don't know what it is, so they have him removed. When he's in remission during the hypnosis, he discusses it again, and the warts come back.
What?
And he has to get them removed again.
Wow! They gave him the space gonorrheas.
Yes.
The fuck!
I told you it had something to do with that earlier. You didn't believe me.
You know what? That's what they were arguing about in the spaceship. He's like, I told you to wash the cup from the last dude.
Because Betty said they treated her real nice and it was
Yes.
pleasant, right? And now it comes out that Barney's like, hey man, they got some stuff from me, it wasn't as bad as it could have been, right? We're living, we're alive,
Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, you could dig deeper. There's more details, but like I wanted to capture some of the main points. I wanted to do the hypnosis last because it kind of contradicts some of the things in the beginning. But this is kind of where, like, you heard me in the beginning where I said something about, maybe some people who are very prejudiced found them and did something to them in the woods. Could that have happened? Sure. But based on the information that we know and the artifacts like the dress having those weird chemicals on them and the rings on the car that are unexplained, what do you guys think?
Well, there's one more thing that we kind of missed out on, and as Betty said, the stars disappeared. So I'm wondering if they actually took them somewhere, and because their watches stopped and all this other stuff happened.
Right.
I mean, it could have been a lot more than 2 hours, but it was 2 hours our time, right? But if she noticed that the stars disappeared and they were abducted and they were actually doing physical examinations on them, they could have literally like took them somewhere. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That's all I got on that. But it just makes, that's a heck of a, recognizing that the stars disappeared. That's a heck of a statement right there.
Well, and they do mention that when they look out, they see the crack above their vehicle, so it's just big enough to block out the stars.
Yeah. Okay.
Worm, while we're talking, what do you mean by the star chart is ridiculous? Like, is that like you don't agree with it? And I'm just curious. I don't want to argue. I'm curious to hear your feedback on it. Sean, go ahead with what you got.
Oh, I look, here's the thing. I think it's, I'm basing this less off of the evidence that is present, and I think there's a preponderance of evidence that is present, which, the suitcases, the scuffed shoes, the rare materials on the dress, everything else, right? Wait, what did Worm say? Oh, the fact that that's on point. Yeah. I agree, Worm. Yeah, absolutely. But it's more the psychology of it, right? Because, I said the thing jokingly, but if you look at it in a serious way, like, oh, did they get found by some, assholes out in the woods and they had stuff done to them? You would think somebody who's fighting for civil rights and trying to get, shine a light on racism and things would not be afraid to say, this happened to us and we survived it. This is exactly what we're fighting against.
Well, I have a different angle on that, because in those times, with what was going on, especially with interracial activity, they would have just been missing. They wouldn't have found anything. They would have just been gone. They might have found the bodies, but those type of things back in those days just ended in tragic, results. Yeah, especially out in the middle of nowhere. You know what I mean?
So you take all that in collectively with the regression therapy, all of the things, and motivation too, right? That's another big thing. Whenever you look at these abduction things, that's one of the first things that I've ever looked at when I've been studying anything to do with occult stuff, whatever. It's like, what do they gain from it? And there is no positive on the other side of this for them, right? To talk about something like this. There's no gain. There's no financial gain. There's no fame, fortune, anything. It's not there. Okay. So when you add all of that together, like, I cannot see this as being anything other than as it's billed.
Right.
Well, this thing just really, I can't get rid of this. The genital warts, they were removed, right?
Yes.
Until they talked about them, and then they reappeared. That's some craziness right there.
It is.
That's another level of spacism, I guess.
Right.
That one messes me up out of all this. That
Yeah.
one messes me up.
It is. It's weird. And the thing is that a lot of the things that they discussed isn't like they just saw it in a movie yesterday.
Right.
Because the Roswell incident was in 47. There were some like random like UFO sighting, like people between that time that started. I mean, it was starting to kind of build.
Mm-hmm.
But the first alien, like the fact that this is the first couple to come out saying, "Hey, we were abducted," and they give you the scenario, and but with the 2 hours missing, I could easily see people going, "Meh, that didn't, it wasn't a UFO. Something happened to you guys, and you're covering up with this crazy story. Something bad happened to you." And now you're covering it up because, you're an interracial couple. There's people out there that don't like you. You probably got your ass whooped in the wood and you're trying to cover it up. But why would you go to that length? And again, they've got nothing. They've got nothing to lose. Like they don't have, they could have kept this quiet and been perfectly fine and probably even ended up better off in the future because of it. But because of all of this outburst of just like, the military getting involved and this her dreams causing more issues. It just, they needed to get help. But when Barney realized that, because Barney was trying to find reasons for this not to be what it was.
Yeah,
he was trying very hard, but he knew that it was not, whatever it was not human. And he talks about it in the no, they're not human. They're not, they're talking to me, but they're not talking to me. It's telekinesis. Right. And what benefit did they get out of it? I mean, they didn't. I mean, if anything, the reputations kind of got altered, and eyes on them weren't necessarily positive eyes.
Yeah.
No, it's like Worm said. Why bring extra heat? It doesn't make any sense. Like there would be less heat if they got found by some racist Klansmen, rednecks, or black folks that were pissed off that it was happening, and you shouldn't be doing interracial stuff, whatever it is. Because if they come out about that at the time, you could imagine that the sentiment would be like, well, that's what you get, but it would be something that folks could equate to an A, therefore B, right?
Right.
There's less heat in that, which people back then would see as a normal consequence from your choice, even as abhorrent as we think this is right at this time. Back then, they would say, well, that's what you get. But for them to come out and say, no, we were abducted by aliens, that's a whole other level of ridicule and criticism that they're bringing into an already tense situation.
Absolutely.
Right. Worm says, looking at the time, his makes zero sense. My dad's a black jazz musician. My mom's a pasty white little girl. You don't want to mix things up and draw attention. I mean, you're right. They're not trying to draw attention to themselves, but when they report it to the Air Force base, and then one of the chiefs or chief detectives come to their church and want to talk to them, and then they're like, hey, you should go see a psychologist. I recommend this guy. They do it. I mean, it's not like we can help you regain these 2 hours. Like they're feeding for this information. Like they're like something, maybe they know that it's real. They're like, this matches what we're trying to figure out. So they're trying to dig and get more information about what was the vehicle? What did it look like? Who are these people? So I think just from the military view of it and their view of it, it just seems very realistic. It seems like that's exactly what happened.
And also, I have to kind of point this out as well. As normal individuals every day doing, I guess, successful things in society, something like this happens to you, you're not the same anymore. You know, you're shook for
Right.
life after that. You know, there's no explanation. It's weird. It's unusual. It just happened to happen to you and your wife. That's some spectacular stuff, man.
Right.
That's amazing. You know, occurrences that you just can't get rid of, even though you don't want to remember it. You know, what I mean, it's
Right.
just there.
Right. Well, that's what we got for tonight's show, guys. Hopefully you guys liked it. It was a nice little blend between our two shows.
Oh, yeah.
I think when I decided that I wanted to do sort of a clash with with Blurred Lines, I still wanted it to be a very fact-based, informative discussion. So I came up with Alien Abduction, and when I came up with this Barney and Betty Hill one, it was like, and started digging into it. It made me feel like there was multiple things to discuss more than just the alien abduction. I think that the racial side of this kind of plays into it. The fact that he's part of the, in NAACP, he's part of the civil rights group, and then there's just, they've already got eyes on them being an interracial couple in the 1960s.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
already that pressure. They don't
Right.
need this extra.
Mm-hmm.
So it hit a lot of points to me to kind of say that this incident is accurate. And that is my conclusion, is they did get abducted.
No, 100%. Without question.
And Worm, I do want to give you a big shout out, man. You hung out the whole show. You said you just randomly found us. We appreciate you. This is great news. This is always fun. Check us out on all of our social media platforms. Evolution's got several shows on the channel. Sean Shank's got several shows on the channel. Some comedy, some serious, some, just whatever. And we do more than just talk shows, man. But this is what we do. We do it because we want to find people like you that are interested and be able to use you guys as a part of the show. So thanks again. And, we've got more shows coming. So until next time, everybody, we'll see you around. All right.
Take care.